I heard the crash of the trash bin outside and stepped onto the driveway. My grandson Trevor stood there with a cheap beer in one hand and an old box from my garage in the other. He lifted the lid of the bin and tossed the box inside so hard that something clattered against the metal. I knew that sound, my medals, the ones I earned back in Vietnam. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted. Trevor turned and smirked as if it were a joke. "Relax, Grandpa, just a bunch of junk. Nobody wants this crap. You know what's worth something?" He took a swig of beer. "Your house, your accounts, your money, all of that's gonna be mine." My chest tightened. "These are my medals, they're memories." "Memories?" He laughed. "Keep them in a nursing home. That's where you belong." Mrs. Ellis, the neighbor walking her dog, slowed down, heard it, and quickly looked away. I just stood there, stunned that my own grandson could say that out loud, in public. He slammed the lid shut and wiped his hands on his shorts. "Soon all this will be mine, Grandpa. Makes life easier for everyone." I didn't answer, I just stared at him, feeling a quiet rage building inside me. And I swore to myself, he'd regret the day he called my medals worthless. This story is just beginning. Subscribe right now and drop a comment with your city and the time where you are. I want to see from where people are watching this story about betrayal and greed. It was a Tuesday morning when I shuffled into the kitchen, the linoleum floor groaning under my slippers like it always did. I'd meant to fix that spot years ago, but my wife used to say the squeak was comforting, like the house was talking back. Since she passed, it just sounded lonely. The old coffee maker sputtered, coughed, then hissed as it pushed out a thin stream into the pot. The smell filled the room, bitter and familiar. I pulled my chipped mug from the cabinet, the one with the faded logo from an auto shop where I worked in the 70s. My hands shook a little as I poured, the tremor of age more noticeable in the quiet morning. "Seriously, Grandpa?" The voice cut through the stillness like a knife. I turned. Trevor was sprawled across the couch in the adjoining living room, legs kicked up, sneakers still on the cushions I'd tried so hard to keep clean. He had his phone in one hand, the glow lighting up his face, and in the other, a half-empty energy drink. "You're still drinking that sludge instead of buying Starbucks?" he said, wrinkling his nose. "No wonder this place smells like the 70s. Do you even know how embarrassing it is to bring my friends here?" I ignored him and sat at the little table by the window. Sunlight was pushing through the blinds, falling in dusty stripes across the floor. I stirred my coffee slowly, tried to focus on the warmth in my hands. But Trevor didn't stop. He never did. "You know what people say about old folks? They cling to junk and cheap habits. You should let me handle the money. I'd make things easier, like upgrade the place, maybe order decent food instead of those frozen dinners you keep buying." My jaw tightened. I wanted to remind him who paid the bills, who'd worked 40 years at a repair shop to keep this roof over our heads. But I just sipped the coffee. Words wouldn't change the way he looked at me. Later that morning, I grabbed my coupons and walked down to Walmart. The automatic doors whooshed open, letting out the sharp chill of the air conditioning and the faint smell of floor cleaner. I pushed a cart that squeaked on the left wheel and headed straight for the dairy aisle. Old habits, milk, eggs, bread. At the checkout, I stacked my groceries on the belt and slid the coupons toward the scanner. The machine beeped once, then twice, rejecting them. A young cashier in a blue vest walked over, gum clicking between her teeth. "Sir, this coupon expired last month." I blinked at the small print, my eyes not what they used to be. "Really? I could have sworn." She shrugged, already half turned back toward her register. Behind me, a man in a baseball cap sighed loudly, tapping his foot. That's when Trevor laughed, loud, obnoxious, loud enough for the whole line to hear. And see, he's stuck in the past, probably thinks gas is still $2 a gallon. The cashier smirked. The guy behind me chuckled under his breath. My face burned. I wanted to explain, to defend myself, but what was the point? "Just take it off," I muttered, swiping my card. As we walked out, the automatic doors humming shut behind us, Trevor leaned in close. His voice was low but sharp. "You really should give me your debit card, Grandpa. I'd save you the embarrassment. I mean, let's be honest, this stuff, managing money, paying bills, it's not really your thing anymore." He grinned, sliding his phone back into his pocket like he'd just scored a point. I gripped the cart tighter, my knuckles white. Outside, the Texas sun was already hot on the asphalt, making the air shimmer. I said nothing, but inside, something in me twisted, something between anger and shame. It was almost 8 when I got back home. The house smelled faintly of dust and fried oil, leftovers clinging to the walls from decades of cooking in the same kitchen. I heated a frozen dinner in the microwave, the hum and rotating tray filling the silence that had once been filled with my wife's voice. I sat at the table with my plate of Salisbury steak, plastic fork scraping against the cheap tray, and turned on the small TV. The evening news buzzed in the background, talking about traffic on Interstate 35 and some local scandal. Trevor walked in, earbuds dangling around his neck, smelling faintly of cheap cologne and weed. He didn't glance at me. He opened the fridge, grabbed a soda, then leaned against the counter scrolling his phone. "Grandpa," he said without looking up, "you ever think about what's going to happen when you're gone?" I set the fork down. What kind of question is that? He finally met my eyes, his expression flat. "I mean, like, the house, the bank account, your car. Don't you think it'd be easier if you just sorted all that now? Save everyone the hassle." The plastic fork bent in my hand. "That's not your concern, not yet." He smirked, shaking his head like I was the fool. "Come on, we both know this place isn't going to be yours forever. Why hang on to it? You could move into one of those assisted living places, sell the house, split the money. Everyone wins." My chest tightened. The TV droned on about weather warnings, but I barely heard it. "This is my home," I said quietly. "I built this life. It's not up for discussion." Trevor chuckled, sipping his soda. "You're so dramatic. Look, sooner or later it's mine. That's how it works. You can fight it, but—" He spread his arms, gesturing around the kitchen. "Everything here already looks like it belongs to me." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The sound of the microwave's fan still cooling, the hum of the refrigerator, the clink of his soda can, it all pressed in. "Don't talk to me like that," I muttered, voice low but shaking. He leaned closer, grinning. "Relax, Grandpa. I'm just being honest. You should thank me for planning ahead. Not everyone gets a grandson who's ready to take over." I pushed my plate away, the food suddenly tasteless. He turned up the volume on his phone, some bass-heavy song rattling the walls, drowning out the last shred of quiet I had left in the house. I sat there staring at the faded wallpaper, listening to the music, and for the first time, it hit me. He already thought of me as gone. It was Sunday evening when my son Mark came over for dinner. He hadn't visited in months, but he showed up with a grocery bag of takeout boxes and the usual forced smile. "Thought we'd eat together for once," he said, setting the food on the counter. The smell of fried chicken filled the kitchen, thick and greasy, but familiar. For a brief moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, like family. We sat at the table, the three of us. Mark, his son Trevor, and me. Paper plates, cans of soda, plastic forks. The kind of low-effort dinner that still felt better than eating alone. Mark asked about my health, how I'd been sleeping, whether I'd been keeping up with doctor's visits. His tone was casual, but his eyes kept drifting around the kitchen, scanning the cupboards, the floor, the peeling wallpaper. "It's a lot for you to handle, Dad," he said gently, tearing into a drumstick. "This house, all the bills, the upkeep. Maybe it's time to simplify things." I frowned. "Simplify how?" Trevor chuckled, licking sauce off his fingers. "He means a nursing home, right, Dad? You know, one of those nice ones with bingo nights and pudding cups." "Trevor," Mark warned half-heartedly, but he was smiling. My stomach tightened. "This is my home," I said. Mark leaned back, folding his arms. "We're not saying you don't deserve it. We're just thinking ahead. Wouldn't it be easier if someone else handled the hard stuff? Selling the place, paying off what needs to be paid, leaving things in order?" The fried chicken grease sat heavy in my mouth. I put the plate down. "You make it sound like I'm already gone." Trevor smirked. "Well, you're not exactly getting younger. And hey, if you want, I can start moving some of the old junk out now. Save us all the trouble later." Mark shot him a look, but didn't disagree. The silence that followed was worse than the words. I stared at the table, at the paper plate stained with sauce, and for a second, I imagined my wife sitting across from me again, rolling her eyes at this nonsense. That warmth flickered, then died under Trevor's laugh. "Come on, Grandpa, don't get all moody. We're just trying to plan for the future, your future, our future." He leaned on those last two words like they were the same thing. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping against the floor. "Enough. I don't want to hear another word about it tonight." The room went quiet. The only sound was the fizz of Trevor's soda can and the hum of the refrigerator. For a brief, fragile moment, I thought maybe they'd drop it. Then Trevor muttered under his breath, just loud enough for me to catch it. "Doesn't matter what you want, in the end, It's all coming to me. My heart pounded in my ears. I looked at him, but he was already scrolling on his phone again, like nothing had happened. And that's when I knew. He meant every word. The next week, the HOA held their monthly meeting in the small community hall at the end of the street. I didn't usually go, but this time a notice had come in the mail, something about maintenance fees and parking regulations. So I showed up. The room smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Folding chairs scraped across the linoleum floor as neighbors shuffled in, chatting in low voices. Mrs. Ellis sat with her little notebook. Mr. Johnson was already complaining about lawn care. I took a seat near the back, trying to stay unnoticed, but Trevor walked in right behind me, shoulders squared like he owned the place. He dropped into the chair beside me, chewing gum, loud enough for the whole row to hear. "Grandpa," he said, stretching his legs out, "you don't need to sit here. You're not going to be living in this house much longer. Why bother?" Heads turned. I felt heat rush to my face. "Trevor, keep your voice down," I whispered. But he only smirked. "What? I'm just telling the truth. Everyone knows I'll be the one taking care of the place soon. Isn't that right?" He looked around the room, daring someone to argue. Mrs. Ellis's lips pressed into a thin line. Mr. Johnson shook his head, but said nothing. The meeting began, but Trevor kept up his little performance. When the HOA president mentioned overdue roof repairs, Trevor leaned in and said loudly, "Guess I'll have to deal with that once the house is officially mine." A few people chuckled awkwardly. My throat felt dry, my palms damp. "Trevor," I muttered, "this isn't your house." He leaned back in his chair, gum popping between his teeth. "Not yet, but soon. That's how inheritance works, Grandpa. You should be proud. I'm stepping up." The words cut sharper than he knew, or maybe he knew exactly. I clenched my fists under the table, nails biting into my palms. For a moment, I pictured myself standing up, shouting the truth, wiping that smug look off his face. But I stayed quiet. The meeting dragged on, neighbors debating fences and parking permits, while beside me, my own grandson laughed and whispered as if the house was already his. And for the first time, sitting there under the buzz of those lights, I felt it. The weight of everyone's silence pressing down, suffocating. He was humiliating me, and no one would stop him. Not yet. The sound of voices carried through the open garage as I stepped onto the driveway. At first I thought Trevor had friends over again, but then I saw the folding tables set up on the lawn. Boxes were spread open, items laid out in messy rows, my old tools, framed photos. Even the worn recliner chair I'd sat in for 20 years. A cardboard sign taped to the mailbox read, "Yard sale. Everything must go." My chest tightened. "Trevor," I called, my voice sharp. "What the hell is this?" He looked up from behind a table stacked with my old books, a wad of bills in his hand. "Relax, Grandpa," he said, grinning. "Just clearing out the junk. People actually pay for this crap. Who knew?" A woman holding one of my wife's porcelain figurines looked at me awkwardly, then at Trevor. "Is this okay?" she asked. "Of course," Trevor said smoothly before I could answer. "My grandpa doesn't need any of this stuff. He's simplifying." I froze. Simplifying. The same word Mark had used at dinner. The woman paid, and Trevor shoved the bills into his pocket. My hands shook as I reached for the box of photos, but Trevor slid it away. "Not yet," he said quietly, "just for me. People pay more if they think it's vintage." A few people chuckled nearby, thinking it was a joke. My face burned hot. "Put it back," I said through my teeth. "Those are family pictures. They're not for sale." Trevor leaned closer, his voice low and mocking. "Family pictures? Nobody cares, Grandpa, except you. And soon enough, you won't even remember who's in them." The words hit harder than a punch. Around us the crowd murmured, coins clinked, the plastic bags rustled. My life, spread across folding tables, priced at a few dollars apiece. The crowd grew thicker, neighbors drifting over from across the street. Some were holding paper cups of soda, others rummaged through boxes like vultures picking bones. I spotted Mrs. Ellis with her little dog, standing at the edge of the driveway, eyes darting between me and Trevor. Trevor clapped his hands together, raising his voice like some kind of showman. "Everything must go, folks. Old tools, vintage photos, even antiques from the war. Can't take them to the nursing home, right, Grandpa?" The words hit me like a slap. Laughter rippled through the group. Uneasy, but laughter all the same. My throat tightened so hard it was hard to breathe. "Stop this," I said, stepping forward. "These aren't yours to sell." Trevor grinned wider, his gum popping between his teeth. Not yet, maybe, but they will be. That's how inheritance works, right? Might as well get a head start. A man holding one of my medals glanced at me, then back at Trevor. "This is for sale too?" he asked. Trevor snatched it from his hand, holding it up like a prize. "Worthless little trinket? Maybe worth a couple bucks on eBay, but don't worry, I'll throw it in cheap. Grandpa doesn't need memories weighing him down." The crowd shifted. Some people looked uncomfortable, others amused. I could feel their eyes on me. Me, the old man who couldn't even stop his own grandson from selling off his life. "Trevor," I said, my voice cracking, "that medal, it was for—" He cut me off, laughing. "For what? Killing time 50 years ago? No one cares, Grandpa. You're done. And once you're in the nursing home, this house will finally be mine. Everyone knows it." My knees felt weak. I heard whispers. Saw Mrs. Ellis shake her head. Saw Mr. Johnson mutter something to his wife. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Trevor tossed the medal back onto the table with a metallic clang and turned to the buyers again. "A half price on everything if you buy in bulk." The crowd pressed closer. I stood there, useless, invisible, while strangers carried pieces of my life away in plastic bags. Finally, I turned and walked back into the house. The sound of laughter and clinking coins followed me inside like a cruel echo. And in that moment, I realized, in Trevor's eyes, I was already gone. The house felt emptier than ever when I shut the door behind me. The laughter from the yard sale still echoed in my head, muffled now by the walls but sharp enough to sting. I dropped into my recliner, the one Trevor had tried to sell for $20. The springs groaned under my weight. On the table beside me sat a cup of coffee I'd poured earlier that morning, cold now, a thin layer of film on top. I took a sip anyway. Bitter, stale. The clock on the wall ticked loud in the silence. Each second stretched too long. I thought about calling the police, about telling them Trevor had stolen from me. But what would I say? That my grandson sold off a few boxes of junk? They'd laugh me out of the station. Instead, I picked up the phone and dialed my son. My hand trembled as I held it to my ear. He answered on the fourth ring. "Hey, Dad." His voice was distracted, like he was already somewhere else. "Mark," I said, swallowing hard. "I need to talk to you about Trevor. He sold my things, my medals. He's—" "Dad," Mark interrupted gently. "You know how Trevor is. He's young, he doesn't always think. Let's not make a big deal out of this." "A big deal?" My voice cracked. "He threw my life into the trash. He said I belong in a nursing home." There was a pause, a sigh. "Look, maybe he's not wrong about the home. You've been struggling, the bills, the groceries, the house. It's a lot. You shouldn't have to handle it all alone. We could find a place, a good one." The room tilted. My hand gripped the armrest so tight my knuckles ached. "You want to put me away?" "No, Dad," he said quickly. "I just want what's best for you, for everyone." For everyone. The words landed heavy, not for me, for them. I hung up before he could say more. The dial tone buzzed in my ear, cruel and final. The house was silent again, except for the clock. Tick, tick, tick. I tried calling Mark again after sunset, straight to voicemail. I left a shorter message this time, no shaking in my voice, no pleading, just the facts. When I hung up, the house felt even louder with the refrigerator humming, the AC kicking on and off, the clock scolding me from the wall. I put on my jacket and walked to the strip mall. The sky was the color of old bruises, purple and yellow. Inside Walgreens, everything was too bright, the aisles smelling like detergent and cherry cough syrup. I waited at the pharmacy window for my refill. The young tech looked past me before forcing a smile. "Date of birth?" she asked. I told her. She glanced at her screen. "Do you have someone with you today, sir? A caregiver or a family member? We can call them." "I don't need anyone," I said, a little too sharp. Her smile froze. She handed me the paper bag. As I turned, I nearly bumped into Mrs. Ellis. She tucked her dog tighter under her arm. "Evening," I said. She nodded at my shoulder instead of my face. "Hope you're okay," she murmured, already moving away. Outside, through the glass, I could see Trevor on the curb, laughing with a couple of guys I didn't recognize, pointing toward our house as if giving a tour. On the walk home, my knees hurt. The paper bag rustled against my jacket. A car passed, and the driver's music thumped through the metal, swallowing the chirp of crickets. When I reached the driveway, a raccoon darted from behind the trash bin, knocking the lid sideways. I lifted it and saw scraps of my life mixed with coffee grounds and melon rinds. A bent ribbon from one of my medals lay stuck to a damp flyer. I peeled it free, wiped it with my thumb. The smell of rot and bleach stung my nose. Inside, Trevor had left something on the kitchen counter, a glossy brochure with soft, friendly colors. Cedar Oaks Assisted Living, pictures of smiling people playing cards under a tree, a line printed in cheerful font. When it's time, make it easy. I picked it up slowly. Where did you get this? I asked. Trevor didn't look away from his phone. They mailed it, or maybe I signed you up online. Doesn't matter. I booked a tour for tomorrow at 10. Wear something clean. No, I said. The word felt small. We're not doing that. He laughed without humor. We are if you want to keep avoiding embarrassment. Or we can do the other option. Power of attorney, you sign, I handle things, you stop worrying. He took a step closer, the cologne on him a cheap, sweet sting. 2 choices, Grandpa, the home or my help. You pick. I'll manage, I said, though the kitchen swayed a little and the clock ticked too loud. He tapped the brochure with his knuckle. You won't. And if you pretend you will, the house will fall apart before you admit it. Don't make me the bad guy for planning ahead. I went to the living room, sat, and called the bank. The robot voice asked for numbers I couldn't find without my glasses. I tried again. Finally, a person answered, polite and distant. I asked about charges, about a card I hadn't used. Sir, we can't discuss third-party activity over the phone, she said. You'll need to come in person with identification. Would you like me to schedule an appointment? I can come whenever, I said. The first available is next week, Thursday at 3, she said brightly, as if offering me a treat. Fine. My mouth was dry. Is there a family contact we can add to your profile? It can help in situations like this. No, I said, and hung up before she could read from the script again. The house settled around me. A plane crossed somewhere far overhead. A thin roar pressed flat by distance. From the hallway, I could hear Trevor's voice through his door, laughing into his headset, talking like he already owned the place, like he'd already made all the decisions. The brochure lay on my lap, its edges cutting into my palm. I tried one more call, an old friend from the shop, Hank. We hadn't talked in years, not since he moved out near San Marcos, but I still had his number. It rang and rang. Hey, it's Hank. Leave it. And Hank, I said after the beep, it's Walt. Sorry it's late, just call me when you can. I waited a while, staring at the dark TV screen until my reflection blurred into the room behind me. When the phone finally buzzed, it was just a text. Busy week, buddy? Maybe next time. No promise, no warmth. I turned the TV on for noise. A commercial bloomed across the screen. A smiling nurse wheeling a gray-haired man down a sunny hallway. Peace of mind for your loved ones, the voice said. I fumbled for the remote and turned it off again. The silence came back like a tide. I went to the sink and poured the cold coffee down the drain. The garbage disposal coughed once, then rattled. I reached for the light and paused. The brochure's cheerful people looked up at me from the counter, all smiles and soft shadows. In the living room, the clock kept going, steady and certain, as if it were counting down to something I couldn't yet see. I stood there until the numbers blurred and the tick became a single long line of sound. For the first time, I admitted it out loud, to no one. I have no one. The words didn't echo, they just sank into the house and disappeared. That night I sat at the kitchen table with the brochure for Cedar Oaks still on the counter, its glossy paper catching the light like it was mocking me. The smiling faces on the cover looked nothing like mine. My hands trembled as I reached for it, but not from weakness, from anger. Enough. For days I'd swallowed the humiliation, the laughter, the stares of my neighbors. But when Trevor dropped that brochure like it was already decided, something in me snapped. If they thought I was too old, too weak to fight, they were about to learn otherwise. I went to the garage. The air smelled of oil and dust, a smell that clung to my hands no matter how many times I washed them. The folding tables were still there, empty now, littered with scraps of paper and tape from Trevor's so-called sale. I found the old trunk shoved into a corner, half buried under boxes, the same trunk I'd carried back from Vietnam. The lock was stiff but broke open with a twist of the screwdriver. Inside were papers, brittle with age, yellow discharge documents, letters, and beneath them, a leather folder I hadn't seen in years. I opened it carefully. It was all still there. Certificates, veteran benefits records, the life insurance policy my wife and I had set up decades ago. My medals were tucked in too, dull and scratched, but they still carried weight. One sheet in particular caught my eye, a letter from the Department of Veterans Affairs confirming survivor benefits. Funds that had been accruing quietly, untouched, money that Trevor didn't even know existed. I felt a strange heat in my chest. For the first time in weeks, it wasn't shame, it was strength. Footsteps thudded overhead. Trevor. My pulse jumped. If he caught me here, crouched over this folder, he'd know something was up. I shoved the papers back into the folder and slid it under my jacket just as the garage door creaked open. "Grandpa?" His voice was lazy, careless, but there was suspicion in it. "What are you doing out here? Planning another yard sale?" I stood, dusting my hands on my jeans. "Looking for a wrench," I said. "The faucet's dripping again." Trevor leaned against the doorframe, eyeing the trunk. "You sure you're not hiding something? You get all twitchy when I catch you in here." My mouth went dry. The folder pressed cold and stiff against my ribs under the jacket. "Just tools," I muttered. "Go back inside." For a long second, he didn't move. Then he smirked. "Whatever, just don't break a hip out here." He wandered back in, the door swinging shut behind him. I exhaled slowly, clutching the folder tight. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the recliner with the papers spread out on the coffee table, the clock ticking like a countdown. For the first time since this nightmare began, I had something Trevor didn't, a weapon. The next morning, I put on the only decent jacket I had left, the one with the loose button, and tucked the leather folder under my arm. The sun was just rising, bleeding pale orange light over the rooftops as I drove toward downtown. My old Chevy rattled the whole way, every bump in the road reminding me I wasn't as steady as I used to be. The law office was on the second floor of a strip mall, squeezed between a nail salon and a tax prep service. A neon sign blinked in the window. Probate and estate planning, free consultation. Not exactly glamorous, but I didn't need glamorous. I needed someone who would listen. Inside, the air smelled of carpet cleaner and burnt coffee. A young receptionist looked up from her screen, eyes flicking over me. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, clutching the folder tighter. "But I need to speak with someone. It's important." She hesitated, then nodded toward the glass door. "Mr. Bradley just had a cancellation. Give me a moment." 5 minutes later, I was sitting across from a man in his 40s with slicked back hair and a tie too bright for his suit. His office was cramped, papers stacked everywhere, blinds half open to the parking lot. "So," he said, flipping open a legal pad. "What can I do for you, Mr. Walter? Walter Harris." My voice shook at first, but I steadied it. "It's my grandson. He's trying to push me out of my home, wants me in a nursing home so he can take everything." Bradley leaned back, eyebrows raised. "Unfortunately, families fight over inheritance all the time. If your assets are titled properly, there's only so much he can—" "He's selling my things already," I snapped. My hand slammed the folder onto his desk. "My medals, my wife's keepsakes, everything. He thinks I'm finished." Bradley blinked, then slowly opened the folder. His eyes skimmed over the documents, then sharpened. This is significant. You have a VA benefits package still active, and this insurance policy?" "Yes," my jaw clenched. "And he doesn't know." Bradley tapped the papers thoughtfully. "Mr. Harris, this changes everything. With these documents, we can update your estate plan, create a trust, even file a restraining order if needed. If your grandson tries to interfere, the court will side with you. But we need to act quietly before he catches wind." I leaned forward. "Then do it. Cut him out. Leave him nothing." For the first time, Bradley smiled. Not the fake smile, but one with a hint of respect. "We can exclude him legally, redirect assets, but you'll need to make appearances. Sign in front of a notary. You sure you're ready for that?" I thought of Trevor's laugh, his smug voice in front of the neighbors, the way he tossed my metal like scrap metal. "I've never been more ready," I said. As I stood to leave, Bradley gathered the documents carefully. "I'll draft the papers. Come back in 2 days. And Mr. Harris, keep this quiet. If he finds out, he might try something drastic." I nodded. Outside, the parking lot shimmered in the Texas heat. My old Chevy groaned as I pulled onto the freeway, but for the first time in weeks, the roar of traffic didn't feel like noise. It felt like momentum. 2 days later, I drove back into town with the folder tucked under my jacket. Bradley had prepared the drafts, neat stacks of paper with tabs where my shaky signature needed to go. Each stroke of the pen felt heavier than it should have, but when the notary stamped the seal, I felt a weight slide off my chest. It was done. On paper, Trevor no longer existed in my estate. But it wasn't enough. I needed proof of his behavior in case he tried to fight. I needed leverage. So I started moving carefully, one errand at a time. First stop was the bank. The Wells Fargo branch smelled of coffee and floor polish, the kind of corporate sterility that always made me uneasy. A young teller named Christine helped me log into the account I hadn't checked in months. She frowned at the screen. "Sir, there have been several ATM withdrawals over the past few weeks, all maxed out." My gut tightened. "I didn't make those." She looked at me carefully. "Do you have your card?" I pulled it from my wallet. "Then someone else has access. Do you live with family?" I nodded stiffly. She lowered her voice. "We can flag the account, issue a new card, but be careful who sees the mail." I signed the forms with a trembling hand, then walked out gripping the new papers like a lifeline. Next, I stopped at FedEx office. The machines hummed as I fed in the documents. Page after page slid out, fresh copies. Insurance forms, benefit letters, trust paperwork. I slipped the copies into a plain envelope and mailed them to Bradley's office, a backup in case anything happened to the originals. My hands shook when I dropped the envelope in the blue mailbox. For once, it wasn't weakness, it was adrenaline. That evening, I sat in the living room with my phone on the armrest, recording. Trevor and Mark were in the kitchen, their voices drifting in. "The old man's losing it," Trevor muttered. "He barely knows what day it is. Once he's in Cedar Oaks, the house is mine." Mark's reply was lower, more careful. "Don't rush it. If he makes a scene, we could have trouble. Just keep the pressure on." I clenched my fists as the phone caught every word. But then the floor creaked. Trevor's voice cut sharp. "Grandpa? You awake in there?" My stomach dropped. I slid the phone under a cushion just as he stepped into the room. His eyes darted to the coffee table, then to me. "What were you doing?" he asked. His tone wasn't casual this time. It was probing, sharp. "Reading," I said quickly, lifting the TV remote. "Can't sleep." He stared for a beat too long, suspicion heavy in the air. Then he shrugged. "Whatever, don't stay up too late. You'll need your energy for the tour tomorrow." He walked back toward the kitchen. Only when I heard his door shut did I dare pull the phone out again. The recording was still running. My hand shook as I saved it. For the first time, I had his voice, his own words. The next evening I sat in the recliner with the papers tucked deep inside the lining of my jacket. I'd sewn a little slit in the pocket myself, hands trembling with every stitch. The folder no longer lived in the garage or even my room. It stayed with me, close to my chest. Trevor must have noticed the change. He prowled the house that night like a cat looking for something to break. His footsteps passed my door once, twice, then stopped. He pushed it open without knocking. "What are you hiding, Grandpa?" His voice was light, but his eyes were sharp. "You've been running around a lot. Bank, post office, even the lawyer's office. Don't think I don't hear things." I kept my face blank. "I pay bills. That's what adults do." He stepped closer, his sneakers squeaking on the old floorboards. "Don't play dumb. You barely leave this chair most days. Suddenly you're busy? Sounds fishy." My throat tightened. The weight of the papers against my ribs felt like a stone. "Maybe," I said slowly, "I just don't like being treated like garbage." He smirked, tilting his head. "You don't like it, but it's the truth. You can't manage anymore. Sooner you admit it, the sooner things get easier, for all of us." The words burned, but I forced myself to lean back, casual. "If you think I've got some secret stash, you're welcome to search the house." He blinked, caught off guard. Then he sneered. "Maybe I will." Trevor tore through the room, yanking open drawers, rifling through my closet, even pulling cushions off the chair. Dust rose in the air, catching in the lamplight. My heart pounded, but I kept my hands steady on the armrests. "Nothing," he muttered after 10 minutes, frustration creeping into his tone. "Exactly," I said. "You see, nothing to find." He studied me, eyes narrowed. Then he leaned close enough that I smelled the sour tang of beer on his breath. "You're hiding something. I'll figure out what. And when I do, it's mine. Understand?" I met his stare without blinking. "Go to bed, Trevor." For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then he laughed under his breath and walked out, slamming the door behind him so hard the picture frames rattled. I waited until the house was quiet again before sliding the phone from my pocket. The recording I'd made earlier that evening, Trevor talking about the nursing home, was safe. I pressed play just to hear it again. His voice filled the room, cocky and cruel. "Once he's in Cedar Oaks, the house is mine." My hands shook, but this time from triumph. He had nothing. I had everything. The house felt different after I signed the new papers. I carried myself a little straighter, answered Trevor's snide remarks with silence instead of shame. It must have shown, because within days his eyes narrowed every time he looked at me. One afternoon I sat in the living room, the old landline cradled against my ear. Mr. Bradley's assistant was confirming the next appointment. "Yes, Mr. Harris, the amended trust is ready. We'll need your signature by Friday. Otherwise, the filing..." The floor creaked. I turned my head and saw Trevor leaning in the doorway, arms crossed. "Who's that?" he asked. My heart thudded. "Doctor's office," I lied, covering the receiver. He smirked. "Funny, didn't sound like a doctor, sounded like a lawyer." I forced a cough. "Hearing's going bad, Trevor. Go do your homework. Oh, wait, you dropped out." His grin faded. For a moment, his jaw clenched, then he walked off. I finished the call quickly, voice low, and hung up. Later that night, as I folded laundry in the bedroom, Trevor appeared again. He leaned against the doorframe, watching me too long. "You've been busy lately, Grandpa. Running errands, making phone calls. You're not plotting something, are you?" His tone was playful, but his eyes weren't. I set down the shirt in my hands. "I'm just living, something you might try someday." He laughed, but it was hollow. "Living or hiding? 'Cause if you're hiding something, I'll find it. Don't think I won't." The lamp hummed, casting a harsh white glow on his face. For a second, I saw not my grandson, but a stranger, someone who would take everything if I let him. When he finally left, I opened the bottom drawer of my dresser and pulled out the recorder I'd bought that morning at Walgreens. Small, cheap, fits in the palm of my hand. I pressed the button. The little red light blinked. If Trevor wanted to snoop, let him. I'd be recording every word. The next morning, Trevor was already waiting in the kitchen when I came in for coffee. His phone lay face down on the table, which meant one thing. He wanted to talk. "Sit down, Grandpa," he said, like he was the one giving orders. I poured the coffee anyway. Let the silence stretch. The smell of burnt grounds filled the room. Finally, he leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I've been thinking, it's time we make this official, power of attorney. You sign one paper, I handle your bills, your accounts, your house. No more confusion." I met his stare over the rim of the mug. "You mean no more control for me?" His smile was thin. "Call it whatever you want, but I'm not asking. You've got two choices, sign the paper or pack a bag. Cedar Oaks has a room waiting." He slid a document across the table. I looked down. The letterhead was sloppy, the notary seal a blurry stamp. A fake. He'd printed it himself. "Where'd you get this?" I asked quietly. "A friend," he said. "Knows how to get things done. You just sign at the bottom and everything stays easy. Refuse and I make a call. You won't like where that leads." For a moment, the kitchen blurred. My wife's photo on the fridge, the hum of the AC, Trevor's hand tapping impatiently on the table. All of it pressed down on me. Then I set the mug down carefully. "You think this scares me?" His eyes narrowed. "It should." I picked up the paper, studied it like I might sign. Then I folded it in half, slid it back across the table. "Your seal's crooked. Next time, tell your friend to align the stamp." His face flushed. "You think you're clever? You won't outsmart me, old man." "I don't have to," I said, standing. "I just have to outlast you." For a second, I thought he might lunge across the table. His jaw worked, fists clenched. Then he snatched the paper back, crumpled it, and stormed out. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the blinds. I sat back down, my heart pounding so loud it hurt. The recorder in my pocket caught every word. When I pressed stop, the little red light blinked steady. Another piece of evidence, another brick in the wall I was building. 2 nights later, I left the house after dark. The air was heavy with Texas heat, the kind that clung to your skin even at midnight. I told Trevor I was going for a walk, but in my pocket was the envelope of copies I'd made, the recordings, the trust paperwork, the bank statements. I couldn't risk leaving them in the house any longer. The FedEx drop box by the post office was nearly empty at this hour. I slid the envelope inside, listened to it fall. My chest loosened for the first time all week. Even if Trevor tore the house apart, he'd find nothing. But when I got home, his car was in the driveway, headlights off, engine still warm. He was waiting. "Where'd you go, Grandpa?" he asked as I stepped inside. His tone was casual, but his eyes flicked to my empty hands. "Walk," I said simply. He circled me slowly, like a cop sizing up a suspect. "Strange time for a walk. Didn't bring your cane, didn't even bring water. Almost like you had something else to do." My throat tightened. I dropped my keys on the counter, tried to look bored. "Needed air, can't sleep with your music rattling the walls." He smirked, but his gaze lingered too long. Then he suddenly lunged toward my jacket, yanking it off the chair. My heart stopped. He patted the pockets, searched the lining, came up empty. His face twisted in frustration. "You're hiding something. I can feel it." I shrugged. "Maybe it's just guilt making you paranoid." For a long moment, silence filled the kitchen, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. Then he threw the jacket back at me. "You think you can play games, old man? Fine. But I promise you, I'll win." He stormed upstairs, his footsteps shaking the ceiling. I stood there trembling, gripping the jacket to my chest. He was close, too close. One wrong move, and the plan would unravel. But when I went to bed that night, I allowed myself a thin smile. The envelope was already gone, locked in a courier's box. By the time Trevor figured out what I'd done, it would be too late. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was setting the trap. The courthouse steps smelled like hot stone and old rain. A Channel 7 van idled at the curb, the satellite dish tilted toward a washed-out Texas sky. Neighbors clustered near the entrance, Mrs. Ellis, Mr. Johnson, and his wife, pretending they were just passing by. They weren't. They were here to see if I would finally fold. Trevor stood at the top of the stairs, with Mark like a king showing off a new palace. He had on a too-tight blazer and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. When he spotted me, he spread his arms. "You made it, Grandpa. Brave." I kept walking. Mr. Bradley matched my pace, one hand steady on my elbow, the other gripping his briefcase like it was a shield. "We go in, we keep calm," he said softly. "We let the papers talk." Inside, the security line swallowed us. The clink of belts, the beep of the metal detector, the tired next from a deputy with half a sandwich on his desk. The hallway hummed with fluorescent lights. The air tasted like dust and lemon cleaner. Courtroom 4. B was colder than outside. Wooden benches, a flag at the front. The judge behind the high desk, expression a careful blank. A bailiff stood near the wall, arms crossed, radio hissing every few seconds. Trevor slid into the first row and turned, catching the eyes behind him like a performer checking his audience. He mouthed, "Watch this," to Mrs. Ellis. We took our seats at the petitioner's table. Trevor and Mark sat opposite, their lawyer, a younger man with shiny hair and an expensive pen, leaning in to whisper something that made them both smile. "All rise," the bailiff called, and the room scraped to its feet. When we sat again, the judge peered down, glasses low on her nose. "We're here for a petition concerning estate planning and temporary orders. Appearances?" Mr. Bradley stood. "For Mr. Walter Harris, Your Honor." The shiny-haired attorney rose. "For Mr. Mark Harris and Mr. Trevor Harris." The judge flipped a page. "I see filings from both sides." Her gaze moved to me. "Mr. Harris, are you comfortable proceeding today?" "I am," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Trevor leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Your Honor, if I may, my grandfather is confused. He's been making rash decisions. We're just trying to protect him and the estate from mistakes." A murmur fluttered over the benches. Mr. Bradley didn't twitch. "We'll address that, Your Honor." The judge nodded. "You'll have time." She turned to Trevor's lawyer. "Counsel?" The shiny-haired one cleared his throat. "We're seeking limited control, power of attorney for financial decisions until Mr. Harris can be properly evaluated. There have been incidents, missed bills, questionable phone calls, unsafe behavior." Trevor stared at me like I was a broken chair he was being noble enough to haul away. "We love him," he said, loud enough for the back row. "We just want what's best." Across the aisle, Mrs. Ellis lowered her eyes. Mr. Johnson shook his head slowly, like he'd seen this movie before. Mr. Bradley placed a folder on the table between us. "Your Honor, opposing counsel is mischaracterizing routine aging as incapacity. My client is lucid. More importantly, his rights are not transferable simply because his grandson wants convenience." Trevor's lips peeled back in a smile. "Convenience?" He let the word hang, then turned in his seat toward the neighbors. "This is about safety. He forgets things. He wanders. Last week..." "Mr. Harris," the judge said, voice firm, "you'll speak through counsel." He shrugged and looked down, but his knee bounced under the table, fast, betraying the jitter underneath the swagger. The judge folded her hands. "All right, we'll proceed in order. I'll hear each side. Evidence only, no theatrics." I could feel the room leaning in, the benches, the cameras that had somehow materialized at the back, the breath held in 100 small lungs. Trevor had brought me here to be labeled frail and confused, to be filed away. He wanted a stamp and a signature, a clean handoff. Mr. Bradley slid a single sheet closer to my fingertips without looking at me. On the margin, he'd scribbled, "Breathe." I did. The judge nodded once. "Petitioners, you may begin." Trevor's lawyer stood, buttoned his jacket, and smiled at the room like it was already his. "Thank you, Your Honor. This won't take long." The lawyer spoke smooth and practiced, like he'd rehearsed in the mirror that morning. "Mr. Harris has demonstrated a clear pattern of decline. My clients only seek to ensure his safety and the preservation of his estate. To that end, we submit affidavits from neighbors regarding confusion and receipts of overdue bills." He placed a thin folder on the judge's bench. Trevor leaned back, satisfied, glancing toward the benches as if waiting for applause. The judge scanned the papers, then looked to Bradley. "Response?" Bradley rose, straightening his tie. "With respect, Your Honor, those affidavits are hearsay, and those bills," he tapped the folder lightly, "were paid in full with confirmation from the bank. But that's not the heart of this matter." He opened our own folder and withdrew a document, crisp and stamped. "This is an executed trust agreement, signed, notarized, and filed. My client has lawfully arranged his affairs. He is neither incapacitated nor incompetent. He is prudent." Trevor's head snapped toward me. For the first time, his smile slipped. "That's not possible," he muttered. Bradley didn't pause. He placed the stamped trust before the judge. "This document removes any ambiguity. Mr. Harris controls his estate. He is not subject to his grandson's ambitions." A ripple of whispers ran through the benches. Mrs. Ellis leaned forward. Someone from the news crew lifted their camera higher. Trevor's lawyer frowned, flipping rapidly through his notes. "Your Honor, this was executed without notice to my clients. Clearly undue influence." "Undue influence?" Bradley echoed. "By whom?" "The only undue influence in this case is a grandson attempting to strip his grandfather of dignity for personal gain." Trevor shot up, voice sharp. "That's a lie! He doesn't know what he's signing anymore. He can't even keep track of his own things." The judge's gavel cracked once. "Mr. Harris, sit down. You will let counsel speak." But the room had already caught the slip, the edge in Trevor's voice, the desperation bleeding through. Bradley adjusted his glasses, calm as a stone. "Your Honor, if my client is confused, then how did he manage to obtain, notarize, and file this document correctly without assistance? The law clerk who stamped it is prepared to testify if needed." Trevor sank back into his chair, but his knee bounced faster, and his eyes darted toward the benches, toward the neighbors who were no longer nodding but staring. For the first time, I saw sweat bead at his temple. And for the first time, I allowed myself a thin smile. The judge shifted her gaze back to Trevor's lawyer. "Do you have anything further to challenge the trust?" The young man cleared his throat. "Your Honor, documents can be staged. We maintain that Mr. Harris is being manipulated." "Manipulated?" Bradley interrupted, voice cutting clean through the courtroom air. "Then perhaps we should listen to Mr. Trevor Harris in his own words." He lifted a small recorder from his briefcase, set it on the table, and pressed play. The speaker crackled, then Trevor's voice filled the room, unmistakable. "Old man's losing it. He barely knows what day it is. Once he's in Cedar Oaks, the house is mine." A gasp went up from the benches. Mrs. Ellis covered her mouth. The cameraman from Channel 7 leaned forward, his lens zooming in like a hawk. Trevor lurched to his feet. That's out of context. He's twisting." The judge raised a hand. "Sit down, Mr. Harris." But Bradley pressed again. "Shall I play more, Your Honor?" He tapped the device, calm. "We have additional recordings, each one showing intent not to protect his grandfather, but to dispossess him, to exploit him." Trevor's face had gone red, his jaw tight. He sank back into the chair, but his hands clenched into fists on the table. His lawyer scrambled. "These recordings may be inadmissible without proper authentication." "They can be authenticated," Bradley said smoothly. "Timestamps, chain of custody, expert verification, and I have already submitted notice to opposing counsel." The judge nodded once, eyes narrowing on Trevor. "The court will admit them provisionally. Continue." Bradley let the silence linger before adding, "What clearer evidence could there be of motive than his own mouth?" The benches buzzed with whispers. Someone muttered, "Shameful." Another, "Imagine saying that about your own grandfather." Trevor's leg bounced so hard the table rattled. He leaned toward his father, hissed something sharp, but Mark's face had paled. For once, he didn't nod along. I sat very still, my hands folded on the table, letting the weight of Trevor's own words crush him. When the judge finally looked back at me, her eyes softened almost imperceptibly. And Trevor, he wouldn't meet my gaze at all. The judge's gavel struck once, sharp. Order, this court will have order. But the benches were alive, whispers, gasps, the shuffle of people leaning in. The Channel 7 cameraman whispered into his mic, the red light blinking steadily. Bradley didn't rush. He waited, letting the noise crest like a wave. Then he laid another paper flat on the table. Your Honor, in addition to the recordings, we have evidence of unauthorized withdrawals from Mr. Harris's bank account. Thousands of dollars, all traced to ATM locations within 2 miles of Mr. Trevor Harris's residence. He slid the statement across. The judge scanned it, eyes narrowing. Petitioners, do you wish to explain? Trevor's lawyer opened his mouth, but Trevor slammed his palm on the table. This is bull! Mr. Harris! The judge's voice cracked like thunder. You will control yourself. Trevor's face twisted. He looked around the courtroom as if someone might step in to save him. But the only faces he met were neighbors, Mrs. Ellis, Mr. Johnson, people from church, all staring, shaking their heads. From the back, someone muttered, Thief. Trevor's voice rose, frantic. He's lying. He set me up. You think some old man even knows how to use online banking? Laughter rippled, harsh and merciless. Even Mark flinched. Bradley kept his voice level. The bank has already confirmed Mr. Harris's complaint. We can subpoena the surveillance footage if necessary, but I suspect we won't need to. Trevor whipped toward Mark. Say something! Back me up! Mark's lips parted, then closed again. His eyes darted to me, then back to Trevor. His shoulders sagged. He said nothing. Trevor's breath came fast, shallow. He turned toward the benches, desperation plain now. You people don't get it. He's senile. He doesn't even remember where he puts his keys. I was helping him. Helping! The word echoed in the wooden room, hollow and weak. The judge leaned forward, her gaze sharp as glass. Helping yourself, it seems. A murmur of agreement rolled through the benches. Phones lifted, recording, catching every tremor in Trevor's voice, every bead of sweat on his temple. For the first time, he looked small. And for the first time, I sat taller. The judge let the room settle, the ceiling vents humming like a distant storm. Counsel, anything further before I rule? Bradley didn't look at me. He looked at Trevor. Then he lifted a small, battered case from his briefcase and set it on the table with a soft thud. The latch clicked. Metal whispered against velvet. These, he said, voice even, are Mr. Harris's service medals. They were thrown in a trash bin during an unauthorized sale at his residence. He didn't raise his voice, but the words carried. Heads turned. Phones rose. Alongside them was a VA letter confirming benefits and survivor funds. Those benefits underlie a portion of the trust corpus. Your Honor, the very items Mr. Trevor Harris called worthless are, in fact, the foundation of the estate he is attempting to seize. He handed up the VA letter with the trust schedule. The judge read in silence, jaw tightening once. When she looked up, her eyes were colder. Trevor's chair scraped. He's staging this. He found junk and you're all acting like it means something. Mrs. Ellis's hand flew to her mouth again. Mr. Johnson shook his head slowly. The Channel 7 camera light burned red. Bradley rested his palm on the open case. Your Honor, we also have sworn statements from 2 neighbors who witnessed the yard sale and heard Mr. Harris declare his intent to place his grandfather in assisted living for convenience. They can be called, but given the recordings and financials, we believe the record is sufficient. Trevor's lawyer whispered furiously, tugging at his sleeve. Trevor shrugged him off and stood, voice cracking. He's manipulating you. He's old. He's confused. Those medals, he doesn't even remember their names. Ask him. Ask him what they are. The judge's gavel fell. Sit down, Mr. Harris. He didn't. He took a step toward our table, hands trembling, face blotched red. You think you can cut me out? After everything I did for him? I kept this place running. You emptied his account, the judge said, flat. You spoke of consigning him to a facility to expedite your access to his home. You mocked his service. Sit down, or I will have you removed. The bailiff shifted, weight forward. Mark reached for Trevor's sleeve at last. Trevor, he whispered, terrified now. Stop. Trevor froze, chest heaving. He looked at the benches, at the phones, the eyes, the mouths forming the word shame without sound. His shoulders sagged. He sat. Bradley slid one last paper forward. Emergency relief, Your Honor. An order enjoining Mr. Trevor Harris from contact, from access to the residence, from any transactions regarding Mr. Harris's property pending further proceedings. And we request the court to recognize the trust as controlling. The judge signed with 2 quick strokes. Petition for power of attorney is denied with prejudice. Protective orders granted as requested. The trust is valid and controlling. This court will refer the financial irregularities to the appropriate authorities. A sound rose from the benches, not applause, but something like it. Relief. Disbelief. A breath exhaled by 50 people at once. The Channel 7 reporter mouthed, "Got it," to her cameraman. Trevor lurched again, half standing. "You can't do this. You can't just—" The bailiff's hand touched his shoulder. He sank back, small now, eyes glassy. The judge turned to me. "Mr. Harris, do you wish to address the court?" I stood. The room swam for a moment. The flag, the seal, the rows of faces. But the weight of the case in front of me steadied my hands. I lifted one medal from the velvet, its ribbon frayed at the edge where coffee grounds had stained it brown. The medal was cold and heavier than I remembered. I faced Trevor. For once, he looked at me and didn't smirk. "You told me these were worthless," I said, the words landing in the hush. "Today, they cost you everything." No one spoke. Even the camera seemed to go quiet. I set the medal back in its place and closed the case. The latch snapped with a clean, final click. The judge nodded, formal, but warmer now. "We are adjourned." We filed out to the hallway where the air smelled like lemon cleaner and hot dust. Reporters moved first, then neighbors. Questions floated. "How do you feel?" "What will you do now?" But they were just noise. Bradley's hand was firm on my shoulder. Mark avoided my eyes. Trevor, flanked by the bailiff, stared at the floor tiles as if they were a maze he couldn't solve. On the courthouse steps, the afternoon sun hit like an oven door opening. Mrs. Ellis reached me before anyone else, her little dog in the crook of her arm, eyes shining. "Mr. Harris," she said softly, "thank you." I nodded once. The case felt light now, almost weightless. I stepped down into the heat, past the cameras and the murmurs, past Trevor's silence and Mark's regret, and felt the solid stone under my feet. The restraining order printed black on white said more than any speech. The bailiff handed Trevor his copy on the courthouse steps, while the Channel 7 camera watched. He tried to hide it in his blazer, but the corner stuck out like a ticket. Mark hovered nearby, hands in his pockets, as if he could vanish inside them. "Don't come near his house. Don't contact him. Don't touch his accounts," Bradley murmured as we passed. It wasn't gloating, just the rules, finally spoken aloud. Trevor looked at me with eyes gone flat. For the first time, there was no smirk, no joke. Just the quick little blink of someone who couldn't believe the trick didn't work. "You can't just cut me out," he said, voice raw. "I didn't," I said. "You did." Mrs. Ellis, bold for once, cleared her throat. "Your grandfather served," she said to him, small but steady. "You should be ashamed." He flinched like it was a slap. Mark tugged his sleeve. "Trevor, let's go." They went, down the stairs, through the heat, into a day that didn't bend for them anymore. At home, the house smelled like lemon cleaner and quiet. I set the metal case on the coffee table and opened the windows. The air moved through the curtains like a tide. On the counter lay the Cedar Oaks brochure, edges curled. I folded it in half, then in half again, and dropped it into the trash. The lid thunked shut, soft and final. My phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. I let it ring out. Another buzz, this time a text from Mark. "He's upset. Give him time." I stared at the words until they dimmed and the screen went black. I set the phone face down. Late afternoon light slid across the living room, catching dust in gold bands. I took a soft cloth from the kitchen and cleaned each metal with slow, careful circles. Coffee stains came off the ribbon, not all the way, but enough. When I finished, I lined them on the mantel in a row, the way my wife used to, then stepped back and looked. The house looked back different. Outside, tires crunched on gravel. A shadow paused at the end of the driveway. Trevor. He stood at the property line, arms folded, jaw working. The paper from the court was still in his hand. "You don't win because of paper," he called, careful to keep his sneakers on the sidewalk. "I didn't win because of paper," I said through the screen door. "I won because you finally told the truth where people could hear it." He took half a step forward, then stopped himself like he'd hit glass. they order. He glanced up and down the street, saw Mrs. Ellis watching from her porch, saw Mr. Johnson watering his grass with a hose he didn't need. There was nowhere for his anger to land. "This isn't over," he said, but it sounded small. "It is here," I said. We stayed like that for a long breath. He folded the order once, then again, then shoved it into his pocket and walked away, shoulders tight, head low. The hose hissed on Mr. Johnson's lawn. A mockingbird scolded from the power line and then fell quiet. I made myself dinner, eggs and toast, simple. The skillet popped and the house didn't echo back with laughter or music from Trevor's room. The silence didn't feel like a wound anymore. It felt like a room with the windows open. After dishes, I sat in the recliner and called the number on the back of my bank card. The woman on the line sounded surprised at how fast the freeze lifted now that the order was on file. "New card will be couriered to you," she said. "We've flagged the transactions you disputed." "Thank you," I said, and meant it. Before bed, I walked the perimeter of the living room and checked the locks like I always do. The habit felt different, less like fear, more like choosing what stayed in and what stayed out. On the way to my room, I paused at the trash can, lifted the lid, and looked down at the brochure. I didn't take it back out. The phone buzzed once more on the nightstand. Another text, Trevor this time. "You'll regret this." I looked at the screen until the little gray box of his second thought appeared and vanished, then stopped altogether. I put the phone face down again and turned off the light. The house settled around me, wood ticking softly as it cooled. Somewhere down the block, a TV laugh track rose and fell. The AC sighed. For the first time in months, I slept with the door open. Morning light spilled across the kitchen table, pale and steady. The house smelled of coffee again, not burnt this time, but fresh. I sat with the newspaper folded open, the metal case beside my cup. For once I wasn't bracing for footsteps or a slammed door. The quiet was whole. Bradley called around 9. "The trust is finalized," he said. "The bank recognized your authority. Accounts are secure. From here, Mr. Harris, you decide the pace." I thanked him, and when the line clicked dead, I stayed at the table a while longer, fingers resting on the case. Later, I walked to the porch. The air was cooler than it had been in weeks, a breeze shifting through the maples. Across the street, Mrs. Ellis waved with her little dog. She didn't look away this time. She looked straight at me and smiled. In the afternoon, the mail carrier slid a stack of envelopes into the box. I carried them inside. Utility bill, circulars, one thick packet from the court, with the protective order embossed at the top. Official, final. I set it with the medals, side by side. What I'd fought for then, and what I'd fought for now. As the sun lowered, I unlocked the desk drawer in the study. Inside lay a small ring of old house keys, bent and scratched from years of use. One was Trevor's. I held it a long time, metal warm in my palm, then walked to the front door. I opened it wide, breathed the evening air, and tossed the key hard into the trash bin at the curb. The clang rang louder than it should have. Final. Certain. When I shut the door again, I slid the deadbolt. Smooth. Easy. I stood in the entryway for a moment, hand resting on the wood. The house no longer felt like a cage or a target. It felt like mine again. On the mantel, the metals caught the last light, ribbons glowing faintly. I touched one with the tip of my finger and whispered to the room, to the walls, to the silence. "You told me they were worthless. Today they protect everything." The words settled into the air and stayed. I turned off the lamp, left the metals in their place, and walked into the quiet.